Well, hello. We are back and we're going to talk about media queries. All right, media queries sounds complicated, but it is actually really, really simple. Let's say that we have a website and we want it to look just great on a big old humongous screen, a tablet, and a phone. So what you do is write a media query, and it's in your CSS, and it checks for the width and height of the screen and the device, whether it's landscape or portrait, and you get to specify different CSS rules for each one. So for a 1900 pixel screen, your website's going to look one way, and for a phone, your website's going to look another way that you specify, and that's the difference. So it used to be that when we first had smartphones, if you went and opened up a website, you would see a scaled down version of that website. And now we don't have to do that. We can provide a different look and feel for the website depending on the media query. All right, so for example, actually let's go to properties because I think my example is pretty self-explanatory. Okay, so media queries can actually be used for a lot of different things. But we normally use them for screens, smartphones, and tablets, although they are used to query whether someone's using a screen reader or not. And that does become important when you're dealing with an audience for which you have to provide alternative access, such as for the visually impaired. All right, so when you write a media query, there's a media type and an expression, which is either going to be true or false. So in other words, if this is true, if the screen is 480 pixels, then put in this CSS code. So if media type is 450 pixels or less, and that's true, display the screen this way. So that's a sample media query. Okay, so here's an example. And I want you to notice this, and the one thing that is a little funny that you have to write for is that you have, if you'll notice, you have two sets of curly braces when you write them. So you just have to remember that and you'll be fine writing your media queries. All right, so at media, that's our media query, only screen. In other words, we're only checking for the screen, and the following must be true. The minimum device width has to be 300 pixels, and this also must be true. The maximum device width must be 480 pixels. So in other words, we're looking at a media query where we're querying whether the screen is a small screen. Hey, is this screen only between the widths of 320 and 480 pixels? Great. Well, then display the images in block form. That is, one underneath the other rather than side by side. So they're going to stack vertically. So notice here we have our at media, we have our query, then we have a set of curly braces, then we have our CSS declaration, property, and value. Then we have another curly brace and yet another curly brace. So that's our syntax. Query, curly brace, CSS expression, curly brace. Okay? All right, so here's another example. At media, only screen and minimum device with 1920 pixels. All right, so in layman's terms, we're saying, hey, is the media a screen, and does it have a minimum device width of 1920 pixels? Well then, we want all of the images to float left. So in other words, they would be displaying side by side. Okay, so there are typical breakpoints, as we like to say, that we would write a media query for. So 480 pixels is at the bottom of my PowerPoint screen that you're looking at right now, and that of course would be for a phone. 600 pixels would be for a tablet, and 992 pixels would be for a screen of some sort, some type of computer screen. Okay, so guys, these rules are going to change and adjust all the time. So it's up to you to look at what a general minimum size would be for a screen. You know, we're not writing for a 320 pixel iPhone or iPod anymore. And 992 pixels, that standard will change all the time too. So as average screen resolution changes, these will change as well. All right, so okay, so here's some example HTML, and I'm actually going to show you that in brackets and the example CSS as well. So here it is. Our link ref is to mediaqueries.css, which I also have up here on the screen. And this doesn't say a whole lot. What says something here is our CSS. We set our body's background color to default to tan. But if the screen has a maximum width of 992 pixels, we're going to change the background color to blue. And if the media screen goes smaller than that, if it goes to a max width of 600 pixels or less, the body background color will be olive or whatever other color I specified. All right, so we're going to go back to the HTML and we're going to preview that. I want to point out in my little short examples, one thing that I wanted to address is I don't have the shiv in here, and I don't have a couple of other things like Google Fonts or other stuff we've been learning. And the reason for that is very simple. It's because I want us to focus just on that one topic. So I want the code to be very simple. And therefore, we don't have some of the things that we normally would have in a full-on website. So these are just short examples with code, and that's how they're labeled in D2L. All right, but let's preview this thing. Okay, so right now it's at the default value, but when it gets below 992 pixels, it changes to blue. When it gets below 600 pixels, it's going to change to olive. So that's how a media query works. Okay, now this is a really simple example of a media query, really simple. What we would probably be doing is changing things that are more like image galleries. We would want them, and we're gonna see that happen. We're going to use, for example, we're going to use the media query probably and CSS Flexbox in a later example to actually have an image gallery that changes from a float, images side by side, to a block or images one above the other. Okay, but that is the absolute very basics of media queries, and I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.